Hey guys, welcome back to ATO Audio. Today on the channel, I'm just going to kind of do a brief overview of building this case for a Pioneer SX-1980. So I'm actually going to build two of these cases. One is going to be for me and my 1980, and one I've already sold to a gentleman. And so I've kind of already got started here, so you guys will have to forgive me. But I started out with this walnut veneer, and I've rolled it with some of this contact cement. And so I still got to put a coat of contact cement on this plywood, and then basically once that dries, I'll be able to put those two mating surfaces together. And as soon as they make contact, guys, it's just like the name, contact cement. It's not coming off. So we got to make sure we do that pretty steadily. So if that's something you guys want to watch, just come on, stay tuned. This case is built a little bit differently than some of my previous cases, so it'll be a learning experience for both of us. So let's get started. All right, guys, so now we've got the contact cement put on both surfaces and it's dried. So now as soon as I lay this on top of here, it's going to be bonded. So we got to make sure we do this right. And so I've seen a few people do this technique, and what they do is they put these boards kind of sporadically placed along. That way it holds it up above the surface until you're ready to make contact. So you can do all your lining up and everything else like that. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to place these boards across it, and I think that's pretty good. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to lay it on top of these boards, and as I go, I'll just pull one of these boards out at a time and push down firmly until I've made really good contact. And then I'm going to get my roller. Let me grab that. Sorry, I got to go off camera and grab that, guys. You'll never know what I did over here off camera. Just grab my roller. So I'm going to grab my roller, and then I'll roll it and make sure I get a really good bond. So wish me luck, guys, because we only get one shot at this. Either we do it right or we do it wrong, and then I'll cry later on. I may just cry on camera so you guys can see the full effect. So very important that we get this lined up correctly, because once we start binding this, guys, there's no coming back. So I'm going to try to do my best to do that. And also I've got to kind of make sure that it's on as straight as possible, because if I start veering off to one side, potentially I can get bubbles. And then I may also not get the veneer completely on the plywood, and all this was for naught, because I do need every bit of this to work. So I'm going to go ahead and start on this side, guys. I'm going to take out this first part, and then I'm going to start binding it. Lord help me, I hope I did it right. So we'll go to our next one. You pull it out. The benefit to using your own veneer is that it's actually thicker than what you would get if you just purchased the plywood. So that's kind of nice about it, is that you get a thicker veneer than what you would normally. And so this is actually going pretty good, guys. No major issues as of yet. And so now I'm going to take my roller, guys, and I'm really going to put some pressure on this and make sure that this contact cement gets a really good bond with this plywood. Because in order to trim this flush, I'm going to use my flush trim router bit. And so I want to make sure the edges especially get a good bond. And so the other nice benefit to using your own veneer is that if you're doing like a finish and you need like a waterfall finish, you know, you can have one continuous veneer so the grain matches up. All right, guys. So that's all there is to it. So this is bonded on there really good. As you can see, I'm picking up the edges and it's picking up the whole piece of plywood. So that's how we're going to put on this contact cement. Worked really well. I've seen some people like glue this, and to me that just seems like a lot of extra work because you got to smear the glue on both sides and then wait. This is instant. So literally I put the contact cement on both sides of this, guys, and off camera I went and had lunch, had a hamburger, bacon cheeseburger actually, with extra bacon, a side of cheese curds, and then my own special cocktail of cheddar ranch French fries. And in case you're wondering, yes, I will probably be dying an early death. But off camera, I do exercise occasionally. Not as much as I should. So now that we've talked about my bad habits, let's get back to the video. So I think this is going to work out really well, guys. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and trim this off. What I'm going to do to trim this off, guys, is I'm going to use my router, and then I'm going to use a flush trim bit to square off all the sides and make sure that it's perfectly flush with the plywood underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I may go ahead and do that on video and just show you guys a quick speed run of me doing this so it looks like I really know what I'm doing. All right, hey guys, here we are back at the table here, and so I was able to actually use my extendable razor blade to take off a lot of this, and it actually worked out really well. There's still a fine lip, I think, so I'm going to go ahead and run it with my trim router anyways. And to just clean it up the edges a little bit, but that worked out really good. It left me with a really nice surface. So I'll go ahead and do that. Remember, eyeglasses, ear protection. Let's make some sawdust. So that's working out really nicely, guys. It's cleaning up that edge very nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that off camera, guys, and then we'll continue on. All right, guys, so here we are at the miter saw. What I'm going to do is cut this in half. That way I can separate the two pieces for the two cases I'm going to make and then start thinking about my cuts from there. This case is a little bit different because each of the sides are cut at a 45-degree angle, so that way it'll give the appearance as the grain continues. One thing I noticed on the original case, though, is they didn't do that. Although they did the 45s, they didn't have the grain actually follow. They used different pieces of wood. And so I think that detaches or takes away from the actual look of the case itself. So I'm going to try to make mine kind of waterfall joints so the grain continues all the way around the case itself. I've never done that before, so we'll see how it goes. So that's why I'm going to cut it into two separate pieces. That way I can keep the two cases separate. And so probably one will be the experiment, and then I'll move on to the second one once I've kind of got my train of thought. So I know this video, guys, is going to be kind of jumpy because I've never done this case before, so it's not like a tutorial on exactly how to build this case. I'm just kind of showing you guys what I'm doing. And I mean, it's the freaking Pioneer SX-1980. So I mean, this is cream of the crop. So who wouldn't want to see this brainstorm of glory? So I'm going to go ahead and cut this, guys, and then we'll continue on. So that's the two separate pieces now, guys. So, you know, going back to the circuit on this, I have it to where it's plugged in to a switch that'll automatically turn on the vacuum cleaner, which is I'm using as a dust collector on this. And sometimes I feel like the saw itself is not getting enough amperage because of that. And so I think it's going to be a good idea. I think I'll get the full power out of this saw once I do that. I think one of the reasons why I haven't done that is I don't know if I'm going to keep this saw or if I may upgrade it down the road. So, and I've just been lazy and I haven't felt like crawling through the attic and rewiring stuff. So that's it, guys. So these are the two separate pieces. Now I'm going to kind of go back to the drawing board and assess how I'm going to do these 45s. And so we'll come back once I figure that out. All right, guys. So while I was cutting up the wood, I got a call from a delivery driver who was dropping off this realistic STA 2100. And so I've talked to about this on the channel before. This is the model that Pioneer sued Realistic over because it has the toroidal transformer in it. So these things are fairly rare. I've got a few of them right now that I need to restore. And so this one looks like it's missing its volume pot, which I have an extra one of those, so I'm not too worried about that. And then cosmetically, it just needs cleaned up. And I'm sure the amp boards probably need to be rebuilt inside as well. So that'll be something that I probably make a video about too. I just thought it was kind of neat that while I was doing this video, this showed up. So I just figured I'd share that with you guys. So if you have ever had one of these Realistics, these things are very, very awesome. And so this is one of the nicest ones Realistic ever made. I think it's every bit of as good as the Sansuis, the Marantz, or the Pioneers for this era, especially with the ones with that toroidal transformer. It's kind of the coveted model. So anyways, thought it was pretty neat. Just wanted to share that with you guys. So let's get back to working on our case. Here we are back after I've done my cuts and dialed in my saw. So I wanted to go over a few things that I do in order to make it successful. So as you guys can tell, here's my cut lines. And when you look at it, you can see the grain follows on both of these. And so I did that on purpose because I wanted to have the grain pattern kind of flow like a waterfall. I don't know if I'll continue this with other cases because I have some offshoots that I can use for another case. And so those won't be exact for other cases, but I might. I don't know. We'll see. So one of the things that I do when I do this, guys, I kind of create what we call a storyboard. And so I do test cuts, and then that way I can refer back to these test cuts when I do it. And so probably hard to see on here, but I write the kind of what I'm doing on it. So this would be an illustration of this top piece here in the middle. And if I wanted to cut on the left side of my saw, this finished surface would be face down. If I was doing the cut on the right side of my saw, this finished side would be face up. And similar thing for the side pieces. Left side of the saw, this finished piece would be face down. And then on the right side of my saw, this would be face up. And so I can't tell you how many times I've done cuts, guys, and it's easy when you're doing this. You get confused, and then you dial in your saw, you get right on the line, you cut it. Well, now that you've cut that wrong angle, either whether it's face up or face down in the 45, you've pretty much just scrapped this piece of wood. You've got to get a whole nother piece and start over. So very frustrating. Beginners do this a lot. I did it a lot as I was learning to do miters and stuff like that. So I find that doing a storyboard and then setting those aside, and I'll probably do storyboards as templates at some point with the holes in them for the sides as well. That way I know exactly what I'm doing on that board for each example. So what I have to do now, guys, is this top piece is actually a little bit thinner than the rest of the boards for it to sit on top of the stereo. So I'm going to actually run this through the planer. I know what you're thinking if you're a woodworker, guys. Running plywood through the planer, not smart, right? But you can actually do it. And so you just have to be a little careful. And we're going to take off probably just 1/8 of an inch. I'm not sure exactly. I'm going to use this old case as my my guide. And we'll do that. That way we can just get it right down to perfect size so it slides right onto the thing. Then from there, we'll have to cut a little lip out that slides up underneath the stereo faceplate. And, you know, from there, it's going to be just turning into finishing this thing. So let me go ahead and do that, guys, and then I'll tell you how it went after I'm done. All right, guys, here we are back at the planer. And so I've got the planer calibrated with my digital readout. And so what we're going to do is plane the underside of this plywood. And so this is the side that nobody's going to see on the case. And so the cool thing about planing plywood is that since plywood is glued in different directions with the grain and against the grain, we really just need to go 3/8 needs to be the total thickness here. So that's going to put us in right on the grain that goes with the blade. And because of that, we're going to get a nice smooth surface on this plywood because of that. Now, if the last surface on here would be across the grain, then it would be pretty rough. You could still sand it smooth, it wouldn't be that big a deal. But the way we're going to do it is going to actually give us a really nice finish anyways. So what I'll do, guys, is I'm going to just edge up on it. And so I'm going to take a couple passes at this before I get down to my final depth, and then that'll leave it perfect for the case. And then I'll go inside and test fit it on my 1980 and make sure we're good to go. So just stick around for the ride. I'm gonna do that now. So here we are, guys. I've got it planed down to its final thickness, and it turned out really good. I must have miscounted my plies because I thought I'd be going with the grain at this point, but I'm still across the grain. But actually, it's still a super smooth surface. As you can tell, I'm running my hands around it without any problems. So you can plane plywood, not a big deal. Obviously, I wouldn't do this if this was going to be the exposed surface. The problem is it's really hard to find 3/8 walnut or plywood around here where I'm at. So it's not like I can just go out and buy this this particular depth. And so the size of the case is 1/2 inch, and then the top is 3/8. So, and then I'm still going to have to get the router and route out a little bit of this so it slides up underneath the faceplate. So turned out really good. I'll take a little light sand to that just to smooth it down a little bit more. But you can do it, not a big deal. I guess the big thing is if you're going to do a lot of it, it could dull your blades sooner on your planer. So that's a consideration. But I mean, this is the first time I've ever done it. I don't plan on doing it a lot. The other thing I could have done is I could have taken 2 sheets of 1/4 inch and glued them together to do the top. They're actually slightly smaller than 1/4 inch. So then 2 of those would be just kind of where I needed to be, maybe a hair thicker, but I think it would work. But I didn't want to have to do that. I thought this was a much better choice to prevent doing that. So ready to move on to the next step. All right, guys, so here we are back. And so I kind of went over creating a storyboard for the sides. And so, but I also did a storyboard for basically the holes that are going to go on each side. And so it's very important that we get those lined up. And so what I did basically was clamp a board to the original case, which was my template. And then I used like a centering hole jig to get the center of these holes. And then I went back with a Forstner bit and drilled these all the way through. And I clamped this to the side pieces so that way I don't get any tear out when I'm actually drilling the holes through. And so I marked my drill with some painter's tape. That way I can get the depth correct on each of the holes for what I'm doing. And that's just to ensure that I don't go too far and drill all the way through the material. And then I can go through with a smaller hole drill bit and then drill the through holes where the screws will actually go through on the sides. So now that I've done this, this is what I'll use for my layout each time I build one of these cases in the future. And so I know this video hasn't been an all-inclusive video of how I built this case. It's kind of just a general overview. And so I've skipped some steps. So moving on, I actually want to show you guys the case itself. And so I'm going to zoom out here. And so as you can see, guys, I've gone ahead and glued up this case. And so we've got 45s on each of the angles here. And so that's kind of difficult because you want to make sure your miters are lined up perfectly. And so luckily I had these right angle clamps that I used, and they worked out pretty well. So I don't know if I'll use this in future methods, but this one worked. So I may make a jig where I can basically just slide the pieces into to get this glue up joint. From there, I went ahead and before I glued it up, obviously I drilled my holes like we just talked about. And then in the original case, they don't come with a cross member support, which I find just mind-boggling as to why you wouldn't do that, because it really adds a lot of stability and strength to the case itself. So I went ahead and just measured and made sure that this wouldn't be a problem on the SX-1980 to begin with, and there's plenty of room for it. So I went ahead and added this cross member support, and it's really made this a lot stiffer compared to the original case that they came with. And so it'll make it a lot stronger, and it gives a lot more reinforcement for the joints here as well. So this thing's pretty much done. I mean, the only thing left to do to this, guys, is really stain it. The customer wants dark walnut stain on this, and then finish it with my lacquer. And so as you all know, we've had some pretty nasty weather in the east side. We've got a lot of rain and snow in some areas, so I'm kind of waiting for some good weather so I can spray this with lacquer. So hopefully the next day or so I should be able to do that. So this case turned out pretty well. The only other thing I'm going to do for this case is I'm going to cut up the side pieces for the faceplate as well and stain those so they match this case. And so as you can see, guys, this is what I was talking about as far as the waterfall effect, you know, as far as with your grain, so your grain can follow the actual case itself. And so they didn't do that in the original case, and really I think they missed an opportunity to really add some aesthetic value to their stereos. I mean, you think about the Pioneer 1980, and that was a very high-end stereo and very expensive for the time, and a touch like that would have made it a lot nicer. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, it wasn't an all-inclusive video on how I made this case. I may come back now that I've kind of done this one time and have a plan, and maybe I can do a more in-depth video about how I built this case. If that's something you guys want to see in the future, I guess let me know down in the comments below. If not, then I won't do that. So, but this case turned out really, really well. I'm very happy with it. And so I think the customer is going to be really pleased with this case. So as always, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch these videos and who subscribe to the channel. And we'll see you on the next video.